Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Hey guys, this is part 2 of the interview of myself by Pam Guess. If you haven't listened to part 1, make sure you go back and listen to that. But with that, let's get into part 2. The thing that we keep on getting is, if it is the jurisdictional exactions continue to move up the scale, because, you want a district? We're happy to give you a district. By the way, we have a really nice fire station plan that we would like to see built as a result of that. Or you want to do a PID in Texas? Great. Give us 10% of the bond proceeds. I mean, there's all of this, and so for jurisdictions to say that it's, they're unjust, that developers are being unjustly enriched is completely wrong. Now, I am a very conservative individual, and I believe that if we're taking the risks, that we should be rewarded. And when you look at all the risks that we in the development community are taking on, yes, we should be rewarded in an appropriate manner. But what we are doing is the privatization of the infrastructure business that the cities used to be in, and they have now shifted that role to the private sector. They want them to build their infrastructure. And all we're doing is using the tools that they would have used to finance that same infrastructure. So the burden would still be on the residents. In this instance, however, it's the residents who are creating the growth. So it's an even better mechanism to really pinpoint where that growth is occurring, and for the electeds to say, yep, we're giving them a district, but my existing residents aren't having to pay for that. It's strictly new growth paying for that infrastructure. So the special districts are a great mechanism and an efficient mechanism to put infrastructure on the ground in advance of growth, as opposed to development impact fees and some of the other types of financing mechanisms that are available.
So you've been around really since the birth of this segment of the industry, and it'd be interesting to hear your take on trends that you've seen, both in terms of growth across different jurisdictions, but also maybe the use of the tool under different circumstances. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, and that's a good question. It really depends on where we're at in the country. For instance, when we started doing deals in California, we were issuing debt and we were building out of bond proceeds. Okay, I had left California in the early 90s to go open up offices for our old firm around the country. But now that I'm back in California, I see California has turned into such a risk-adverse place to do business, and of any place in the United States that should be embracing this and making it as easy as possible for developers to build and finance infrastructure, it's California, just given the huge issues they have with the supply imbalance of homes needed to provide affordable housing. But now to use a district, and there's exceptions to this, they want you to put in the infrastructure, and not only do they want you to put in the infrastructure, but they want 40 to 60% of the homes within each one of the districts or improvement areas to be built and on the tax rolls. And then they'll issue debt to repay the developer. Now, that is a very inefficient way of reducing the cost of capital. Don't get me wrong; we appreciate it, but what you're asking for trends, and this trend has occurred over a long time, but I've just seen them become so conservative in how they're using this tool that it has gotten to be inefficient. Especially when we're trying to put infrastructure and lots on the ground so that we can address the supply imbalance. So California, I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit. California doesn't have an affordability problem. It has a housing problem, meaning we're not putting enough lots on the ground, and we'll save that for another topic. But the issue is really CEQA. But In Arizona, for instance, we're not seeing the use of this tool very often, and it could be used much more effectively. Now, with that having been said, there are some jurisdictions that are really wanting to use this tool. We're seeing it in the West Valley. Casa Grande is using it. Buckeye, for instance, is embracing it. I think Goodyear also will be using it, but that's where all the growth is going to be occurring. So we see those jurisdictions that were originally very conservative wanting to be more aggressive, I guess, and more realistic, because they realize that, hey, this district where we thought all these bad things could happen because the attorneys were running around telling them all the bad things that could happen, they found out that's really not true. So we have huge infrastructure issues related to water treatment, roadway. Let's use this tool to build infrastructure and advance the growth. So Arizona, some parts of it are really coming around. Obviously, Texas is great, yeah, depending upon what tool. However, we have seen in relation to the use of PIDs, the cities becoming more and more transactional, if I can use that, meaning they'll come with their hands out. The policy is, hey, if we give you a PID, we want 10% of it for our infrastructure. Florida is still pretty much business as usual. We don't get a lot of deals done in the Carolinas just because it's hard to do transactions, just the way that the state government and the enabling statutes are set up, and the projects typically aren't as large. Colorado is going and blowing, as we've kind of talked about, but the trend is they're starting to get pushback from some of the residents on the mill levies, and there's starting to be legislative actions going on. And with Nevada, it's business as usual. Everybody will, at least in southern Nevada, the use of special districts is pretty common, and they're becoming more common up in northern Nevada as well. So those are, kind of high-level view of the world, at least where all the special districts are.
And what would you say to him? And you and I have talked about this, and we run across it occasionally, where we see clients or other consultants treating the formation, structure, use of these districts as sort of cookie cutter, where this is how we do it. Boom, 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 create and move on.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about the approach that you've taken to district structure and formation, and and projects and how different they all are.
Yeah, I wish one size fits all, but every project is different, meaning in terms of size, infrastructure requirements, what school districts it in, what jurisdictions is it located. What does the city, the county anticipate or require that the development or developer provide so that they can get their entitlements? And we have seen a lot of underwriters, this is the way it's done. This is the only way to do it, period, end of story. Or consultants, this is the only tool you can use. Generally, those are the deal structures that work best for the underwriter or the consultant. But we start with the very first premise of, what are you interested in? Are you IRR driven, or are you nominal dollar or multiple driven? And you only can pick one. You can't pick both. So based upon if the answer comes back IRR or nominal dollar, then that begins the path that we're going to take to help them accelerate cash into the pro forma in the case of IRR, or in the case of multiple or nominal dollar, to set up the district that's going to allow them to pull as much money, as much reimbursement as they possibly can through not only the districts but also other tools. So that's where it all starts. And every deal we do is custom, is handcrafted, and is a custom financing for that project, for that developer, for that developer's business plan. given the puzzle pieces that we have to work with in that particular jurisdiction with that particular project. So there's a lot of, off ramps on that conversation on how we move it from there, but that's where it all starts.
Right. I heard someone say at one point, and I think I found this to be true, that you don't learn anything after the age of 35 by a pure success, that you have to stumble, and that's where you do a lot of your learning. What would you say, if you had to name some of your greatest learning experiences in your career, point to a couple?
Well, one of and I, for any city folks that are on the podcast, I'm going to apologize in advance, but I don't trust anybody. Okay, and so I have been with some transactions now for over 30 years. I mean, these projects are big, and we see a lot of different finance directors coming in. We see a lot of electeds coming in, going, city managers, city attorneys. And the thing that we have found out is that you absolutely need to have a very detailed, understandable, simple, if you can do it, document that lays out who's doing what when and how things are going to be estimated and how they're going to be paid and how costs are going to be allocated. Because I had a client once, they were in a hurry to annex into the city so that they could get water service. As part of that, we were asking and strongly recommending to our client that as part of their annexation, they set up a pre-annexation and development agreement, and which they did. But we also said as part of that, we want to be able to put in very specific district financing tenets, meaning once we annex into the city, you will form the district pursuant to this agreement. They decided not to do that because it was going to take too much time. They annexed into the city. The city said, hey, don't worry about it. Trust us. We're going to give you the district the way that we've discussed here today. Just annex in, and then we'll work with the formation of the district. So we annexed in, and when it came time to form the district, 6 months had gone by, and they said, we are so glad that you're here. Let's get started with that district. And oh, by the way, that fire station you're supposed to build in year 5, which is $25 million, we would like you to build it now, especially if we're giving you this district. That was my lesson learned. If these agreements, they keep everybody honest.
It's a roadmap for both sides. I would say there's just as much benefit for the city in a lot of cases as there is for the developer, because developers come and go, and then everyone's expectations are laid out in a document that's simple to follow. And yes,
and we'll even put examples in, on how you calculate the cost sharing. I mean, just keep it very simple or give them examples. Because if you're using language that is ambiguous and is not clear, the next party that takes over that agreement, be it from the city side or district side or the developer, they will use that to their advantage. And what we just want to have is a clear understanding. We want to have certainty on the part of what we can do, when we can do it. We also want that certainty that if we ask the city to do something, here's how it'll be done. We want flexibility so that we can adapt to changes in the market, be them good or bad. And we want to spell it all out in the document. And we're not trying to hide anything. We're just writing it all out, and we're explaining to the jurisdiction why we want this, why it's important, and why it's for benefit of the jurisdiction as well.
right.
So I will never ever. I mean, I will always do what my clients say, but that was the biggest learning lesson. Unfortunately, is it's kind of like the Animal House. You fucked up. You trusted us.
Yeah.
I mean, pardon the French, there, guys.
Right.
But that's what happened.
Right. And it gets back to something we were talking about earlier too, on a deal that we thankfully were not working on, or maybe we should have, where there was language in the document that effectively will prohibit additional bonds from being issued, and basically really hamstrings the development of future infrastructure for the developer.
And to that point, that's why I'm saying somebody has to be the trailblazer, the reader of documents. And everybody's so focused on one little narrow point. Oh, I got to prepare the indenture. All they know is the indenture. They don't know anything about the project. They don't know anything about the business plan. They don't know anything about the timing, of when this infrastructure has to be in, et cetera. And that's why I keep on telling everybody, you need us to go through and read the docs and make sure that which is planned, okay, whether it's, last week or 20 years ago in some instances, is that which is being implemented.
Right.
Period. End of
which was
story. And
possible.
nobody did that on that transaction,
Right.
to your point.
Yeah, pretty ugly result. To kind of wrap things up, when you're looking at a project, how do you determine a successful financing? I mean, if you're going to, when you walk away from a transaction, what can you say, this worked out exactly like we wanted? What does that look like?
Well, it all starts with that first meeting with the client. What are you trying to accomplish? What problem are you trying to solve? Are you IRR driven or are you nominal dollar driven? And so every deal is different because every one of our clients' expectations are different. And so when we can walk away from that transaction saying we were able to get our client as close to their business plan as possible, and here again, when I'm saying that, we're not guaranteeing loans or we're not guaranteeing any kind of bonds. These are all non-recourse, long-term, tax-exempt bond financings. And so we're setting up structures that work for our clients, financing structures and their business plan. But also, if we've set up a development agreement or a development financing agreement that creates certainty, not only for now, but in the future, and allows them as much as possible to reduce, eliminate, and defer costs until those costs or infrastructure is really, truly needed. And that's one thing that's becoming more and more important to us. I mean, it's always been important, but so many times you talk to a city and they want, hey, when you open up your first model complex, we want the 4-lane highway done, with a divided median, all landscape. Could you do that for us? We say, yeah, we could, but, why don't we just build 2 lanes initially until, we actually need the other 2 lanes. And then we'll put in, the median and we'll put in the other 2 lanes when our traffic studies require that to be put in. And explaining why, that makes sense to the city and why that makes sense to the development community. So we always have to ask ourselves questions. Why are we doing this? What value are we adding? Is this important? Who's asking for it? But, we're always questioning everything because the more questions we ask, not only of ourselves, but of the city, but of the developer, we're able to craft a better financing strategy. Now, here again, I think I probably got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but, to answer your question very specifically is we did what our clients asked us to do, and we were successful in doing that.
Yep. Everyone's happy.
Pam, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the time out of your day today to interview me. I really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. I had a lot of fun too.
Well, we'll have to do it again.
Yes.
And for all of those of you out there, if you enjoyed this episode, please share this with your colleagues and make sure you subscribe to the Land to Lots podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And we look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. And as a reminder, I really encourage you to go to Amazon and get your copy of Land to Lots. You can drill down on some of the comments and strategies and concepts that we discussed here today. Thanks much.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.